Hi, welcome to my channel, or welcome back. I'm Chris. I love movies, I love books, I love games, I love watching videos about people talking about those things, and I really enjoy making those things too. And I enjoy talking about those things. Hopefully you do too, and that is exactly why you're here. Today's video is going to be super laid back. It's just one where I'm going to be going over everything that I've watched, read, played, done in May as a little kind of like May book report. It's currently like 29 degrees in London right now, maybe even higher. So we've got all the windows open. We live on a really, really busy road where there's constantly roadworks and cars driving past and children screaming in the street. So we're just going to vibe with it. Otherwise, a video will just never get filmed, basically. Altogether, it's been a relatively low key one for me in terms of like things that we've watched, particularly movies. I think we probably average around like, I want to say like 10 movies a month or so. But I think we've only watched like 5 this month, and for very good reason. But we're just going to jump right into it, basically. First, I want to talk about the TV shows that we've been watching, namely anime, and this is kind of the main culprit as to why we've not really been watching many movies. We recently got a Crunchyroll subscription because we took a trip to Japan at the beginning of April, and we were kind of brushing up on our anime and Japanese films before we went. So we watched Death Note and Psycho-Pass, but since then, into May, we've been watching things like Attack on Titan and Frieren, two extremely different but very renowned anime titles in their own right. I'm only about 12 episodes into Frieren so far, and we've only just finished season 1 of Attack on Titan, so please do not spoil anything for me in the comments. I gotta say, they've both been really surprising and incredibly detailed, which, for a newcomer to anime, I guess that's just what anime is. You know, this might sound like the coldest or tritest take for anyone that's really big into anime that's watching this video, but I've really been coming to the terms of the fact that anime is just able to develop stories in ways in which the regular Western live action filmmaking or TV making isn't really able to, maybe because it's like restricted by budgets, or, you know, series lengths, or maybe even attention span in the day and age of streaming platforms. You know, for both Frieren and Attack on Titan, characters are just so well developed and so well fleshed out that whenever anything happens to any of them, there is so much weight and gravity to what's happening on screen, and there's so much investment in them. You know, the plot to both animes really takes their time as well, almost to a frustrating extent at times, but it kind of all adds to the build-up and payoff of certain story arcs or character arcs that I just think regular contemporary Western television is just too, come on, let's get on with it. This show cost us $200 million to make. It's on Netflix, and, you know, people aren't actually paying attention. We need to remind each other of the plot. We need this big spectacle to kind of justify the cost. This is one of the many lorries that pass through our street. It's impossible to get any peace and quiet around here. You know, I just think contemporary television in the day and age of streaming platforms is so algorithmically driven and motivated these days that I just don't really feel compelled to watch anything that's out at the moment. You know, I'm sure there's like some huge hits out on like HBO and Now TV at the moment that are worth your time. All this to say, basically, I've really been enjoying both of them for very, very similar reasons, even though they're very different TV shows and doing different things. For those who don't know, Frieren is a fantasy anime about a group of heroes that have just slayed the Goblin King or the Demon King or whatever. They've basically slayed Sauron, and they returned to the city at the end of this journey, and they've kind of been, you know, hailed as heroes of the realm. And they all kind of have to go their separate ways. But one of the party members is an elf, and she is immortal, and she outlives her party. And the whole show is about her reflecting upon moments that she had with these characters and the impact they had on her that she maybe didn't quite appreciate at the time or didn't realize. And she's kind of learning to understand humans and where they, you know, what their motivations are and where they're coming from emotionally, because she's so emotionally detached from people, because what might be 100 years for one person is kind of a blink of an eye for her. And man, almost every episode of that show so far has made me cry. It just sort of resonates with me on such a deep level about like morality and people and friendship and love and family and found family and things like that, that it was just a complete surprise for me, really. You know, knowing almost nothing about anime and having absolutely no experience with anime as like or manga as a sort of artistic canon, it's just been like a huge, huge surprise to me. And I've basically recommended it to everybody that I've come across, even if they're not into anime, even if they're not into fantasy. It is just a really, really special show It's very slow, it's very gentle, it's very calming, and then when it actually gets a little bit action-packed, it gets really, really good because, again, there's just so much investment into the characters that when they face hardship, it really, really hits. So, yeah, I'm only like 12 episodes into it. I've got a long way to go, and I know season 2 is out as well. I just need to crack on with it and watch it because I don't think there's been a single bad episode so far. Whereas Attack on Titan, to my knowledge, is a show, is an anime about this massive walled city. We don't really know if it's taking place in the future or the past or in an alternate reality. We're not quite sure. But basically, humanity has gathered together in one massive city that is split between like 3 different cities, and there's walls that separate the cities. And basically, they are at war with these titans that live outside the city that constantly just try and destroy the city and make their life hell. And it's about these group of characters that kind of get galvanized by a whole lifetime of living in fear to these titans. And it's basically just about how, war and trauma can lead you down a path towards making really poor decisions, or decisions that are motivated by fear and guilt and regret and shame and fear and stuff like that. And it's quite a heavy show, I'm not gonna lie. Like, yes, anime can be really gory and it can be really adult, but there's something about this show that is actually really quite bleak and depressing in every single episode. And for maybe the first 5 or 6 episodes, I kind of wasn't really into it, because off the back of watching something like Frieren, which is so gentle and lovely and kind, to then watching something that's really bleak and dark, I was kind of like, I don't really know if this is for me, but it really has grown on us, and we just can't wait to find out what happens next. And again, it just feels like the show is doing an awful lot. Only 3 big narrative arcs have really happened, but in that time you get so many different perspectives. You sort of see into the minds of loads of different characters and how those things have affected different people. There's also a lot of like bait and switches. There's lots of things that happen whereby you kind of don't really know where the episode's going, and then there's a really good twist at the end. There's really good cliffhangers, and you do just sort of begin to understand where every character is coming from and why they're behaving the way they're behaving. And yeah, I really have absolutely no idea where that show is going, and it's again not been anything that I thought it would be like. So if you're a fan of Attack on Titan or Frieren, please let me know in the comments and try and enjoy some of the hype with me, but do not spoil anything for me, because it kind of is all we're watching at the moment. They've both been really spectacular and get a huge recommendation from me. I could not be picking a warmer time to be filming a video like this. What did I do with those books? There's that. Oh, there it is. And then, yeah, I want to get on to books real quick because I've read a couple of books this month. Basically, I read a couple of books in April that I don't really think I was a huge fan of, and I figured I need to get back on track with some writers and some authors that really do it for me. And I decided to pick up Cannery Row by John Steinbeck, one of my favourite authors here on this channel. It's one of his shorter books as well, and I think that's why I picked it up. And I was like, I just need to read something short and quick and good. And Cannery Row was a really good shout for that, basically. It's kind of like one of his quicker, briefer novels, and it's one that maybe didn't really feel like it developed its characters as much as we're used to with a John Steinbeck novel. It just follows this group of like bohemian misfits that live in Cannery Row in California, and the parties that they have and the little community that they're part of. And they basically really want to throw a party for the Doc, who is a like marine biologist that lives in the area. And yeah, it was just really strange and silly and kind of not really what I was expecting at all. There's some really, really nice passages in here, as there always is with a Steinbeck novel. So even though it was kind of like an average Steinbeck book, it was still maybe leagues above some other books that I've read this year so far. I'd recommend it if you're a big fan of Steinbeck. Like, it's always worth reading more of his work, but it's not something I'd like rush out to like recommend to everybody that likes reading. And then immediately after that, I went straight on to The Log of the Sea of Cortez by him as well. Just because I was fancying some non-fiction writing. I do enjoy a non-fiction Steinbeck from time to time. And this book is about John Steinbeck and his friend Ed Ricketts, of which a character is actually kind of based off in Cannery Row, which is quite interesting. There's a little overlap there. And it's basically about John Steinbeck and Ed Ricketts as they charter a ship to take them around the Sea of Cortez in California where they just want to log and capture loads of different fish and sea urchins and anemones or anemones, however you say it. And there are these just little brief passages where John Steinbeck talks about different philosophies that he's been thinking about, the way that he sees the world, the way that he sees people and humanity and its relationship to nature. And he kind of thinks a lot about the different people that they see on this expedition. And it was just a breeze of a book to read, really. It was only a couple of 100 pages long, and I recently went to Lisbon in Portugal, and it was really nice to read it there just because you kind of feel like you're on the ship with him in the sun with the sea blowing through your hair and everything. And yeah, again, it wasn't anything remarkable or outstanding. It was some like solid John Steinbeck writing, and one that I'd recommend to fans of his, but not one that I'm saying you should immediately drop everything and read. But I also got these really lovely bookmarks from a book and coffee shop in Lisbon called Fable. It was directly opposite the Airbnb that we were staying in, and they were really kind and friendly in there, so I'll be using those moving forward. So yeah, it was nice to just get a couple more Steinbecks under the belt, you know? But also, I've just started reading in May. I don't know why I bought this, but one second. Yeah, I'm not entirely sure what compelled me to buy this. I think it was because I talked about Joe Hill on one of my TBR reading vlogs, and it was on sale somewhere, and I just felt compelled to buy King Sorrow by Joe Hill, his latest book. It is maybe the biggest book I've ever purchased. It's even bigger than The Count of Monte Cristo. It's like a massive, large format, hardback book. I'm about 130 pages into it, and it's actually just been really enjoyable to read this like at night before going to bed. It's really readable. It's really simple. The plot is kind of strange. It's very, very Stranger Things coded, or Stranger Things inspired, let's say. And I think it takes place over several decades as well. And I think it was his first book that he wrote in like 10 years or something. And the sort of Joe Hill, Stephen King community have been a really big fan of it. So I just figured, what the hell, life's short. Buy the book, read the book, enjoy the book. And it's been good fun so far. For those who aren't familiar with it, it's about a group of friends, one of which is being blackmailed by some horrible people because his mum is in prison, and they decide to summon a demon to try and get revenge on them or something, and then things kind of spiral out of control, and they end up having to sort of sacrifice people every year to satiate this demon. The demon of which is a massive dragon, I think. I'm only about 130 pages into it, and that is kind of all starting to kick off finally. But, you know, there's only like 700, 800 pages to go, and I think it spans over decades, so I'm quite interested to see where it goes. And, you know, reading it through the lens of it being like a Stranger Things TV show is kind of working for me. It's currently set in the 80s. There's lots of little references to 80s culture and paraphernalia, so you can kind of see how a book like this gets written and made and released, you know, not least because it's written by Joe Hill, the son of Stephen King. But it's quite nice to sort of just have something on the back burner that you can kind of take the pressure off and just read every night and not really worry about the length of it at all. So that's been good fun as well. And then that gets us on to movies that I've been watching in May. So yes, because we've been quite heavy into our anime and reading as of late, the number of movies we've managed to get in this month has been quite low. I'll kind of go through them in order, but firstly I want to talk about seeing The Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring at the Royal Albert Hall with my parents and one of my best mates. It was maybe one of the most spectacular, mesmerizing and sort of spiritual moments, you know, when you see one of your favorite films performed like that with a live orchestra, with a live choir. It was just absolutely incredible, honestly. Like words cannot do justice how amazing it was. And we also got incredibly lucky because Sir Ian McKellen came out and did a little introduction for us. He quoted some of the dialogue. He told a couple of anecdotes about when he made the film and that he's going to be filming The Hunt for Gollum. I didn't get any footage because everybody was really respectful and watched it quietly, and we had a row of guys in front of us that laughed at every meme moment in the film as well. And I just don't think I'll ever experience watching a film like that again unless I go to the Royal Albert Hall and watch another one of those kind of performances. I mean, like, I love Lord of the Rings anyway, and I love The Fellowship of the Ring so much, and I love the score so much, is why I listen to it quite recreationally, just When I'm doing the food shop or cleaning the flat, I'll listen to it quite a lot. But seeing it performed live like that really gives you a kind of new appreciation for how amazing that score is, and how the way in which they kind of actually perform their instruments and play their instruments really informs the tone and the tempo and the feeling behind each part of the score. You know, like moments where things are really quick and tense. You can see the string players kind of playing in a really rigid way. I'm sure there's a proper word for it that I just don't know. If you do know, let me know in the comments. If there's really big sweeping moments, then you can really see that they're really like gliding over their violins. And it was just incredible. You know, the boys' choir and the female and male choirs were spine-tinglingly amazing, and I genuinely think if you're able to go and see one of those performances at the Royal Albert Hall, you absolutely should do it. I know they're doing it for Star Wars this year. They're doing like Pirates of the Caribbean. I think they've done things like Gladiator and Back to the Future in the past, and yeah, truly just such a special occasion. I just really can't gush enough about it, honestly. But for other films that we watched in May, I'm just getting my Letterboxd up real quick. You can follow me on Letterboxd, by the way. It's just Chris Hambling, which is the name of this channel as well. Yeah, when we got back from Japan, we kind of told ourselves we were going to watch more Japanese cinema, and we didn't really get around to doing that at all. But we did watch Our Little Sister by Koreeda, who is maybe one of our favourite filmmakers currently. And it's a film about, after the death of their estranged father, 3 adult sisters invite their teenage half-sister to live with them. And it's basically just a little slice of life of these sisters looking out for this half-sister that they don't know very well, but has a lot in common with them because of the relationship with the father, although her relationship with the father is very different to theirs. And there's lots of kind of generational trauma, and like with some other Koreeda films, there's a lot to do with how you never quite really understand your parents or your family members, even though you have so much unspoken similarities with them. How kind of time sort of repeats itself and how characteristics repeat themselves over generations. There's just really lovely moments where they sort of cook food together and look out for each other. It was an easy 5 stars from me. It's really my speed of movie where like nothing really happens. The sort of tension and the drama is all to do with like being a person and being imperfect and, you know, having complicated relationships with people. That's the sort of stuff that I really enjoy. So it was kind of a home run for Koreeda for me for that one. It was a very easy 5 stars. And then we saw The Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring at the Royal Albert Hall. And then afterwards I went home for the weekend to spend some time with my parents, and we watched Black Rain by Ridley Scott because my mum watches this channel and she bought it on DVD because I mentioned it in another video before. And yeah, my review was, it felt like it should have been directed by Tony Scott, his brother, which at the time felt like a really hot take, but then looking at other Letterboxd reviews, everybody had the exact same opinion. It would have been better with someone other than Michael Douglas in the lead role, but on the whole, it was a half-decent and enjoyable romp that we like to say in the Hambling household. It's about 2 New York cops who get involved in a gang war between members of the Yakuza, the Japanese mafia. They arrest one of their killers and are ordered to escort him back to Japan. However, in Japan, he manages to escape, and as they try to track him down, they get deeper and deeper into the Japanese mafia scene, and they have to learn that they can only win by playing the game the Japanese way. It was made in like 1989, so you can kind of imagine it's a sort of fish out of water film about an American cop that's in Japan and he kind of has to learn their ways. It sort of reminded me of like the format of something like Rush Hour, and it was just sort of 80s cop cheese, basically. It kind of reminded me of things like To Live and Die in LA. It did feel kind of weird that it was made by Ridley Scott. It was very kind of just sort of paint by numbers cop movie, which considering before then he had done things like Alien and Blade Runner, it felt definitely strange. I'm sure there's kind of an interesting production story behind that of like, why is Ridley Scott making this film? I think I remember seeing that maybe it had quite a long production history and loads of different directors and writers attached to it. You know, I'm not like huge on Michael Douglas. Like, I've seen The Game. He's obviously been in things like Ant-Man. You know, he was in things like Basic Instinct, Falling Down, Wall Street. And so I kind of always imagine him as like this sort of, you know, old businessman, yuppie character. And the fact that he's playing this like kind of hardened cop just didn't really work for me. It kind of felt like it needed someone like an Al Pacino in it, maybe someone a little bit more eccentric or charismatic or charming kind of needed to be the main character, because he just kind of felt a little bit miscast for me, really. There's a really cool chase sequence at the end on motorbikes, but he's very clearly not riding the motorbike and a stuntman is, so it kind of takes you out of it a little bit. But overall, it was a fun movie. Can't really say more or less about it. And then, because we had seen The Lord of the Rings at the Royal Albert Hall, we decided to watch The Hobbit: An Unexpected Journey, which I've not really watched since they came out, to be honest. I do remember liking the first one. I remember enjoying the second one. And I think by the third one, it had completely fallen off the wheels for me, or the wheels had come off the movie entirely. And I think just from that experience, it was also around the time that, like, big franchise films were coming out with reboots and prequels and sequels, and it just felt like it'd run its course, really. And I didn't really enjoy it that much when it came out. So it was quite interesting trying to watch it with like fresh eyes and from a sort of 2026 perspective. The Hobbit: An Unexpected Journey really is just okay. It just is an okay film. The first hour absolutely rocks. Sections of it are really good. The encounter with Gollum is perfect, but a lot of it is a whole lot of nothing. There's too many moments where you feel like they're on a set with loads of green screen. There's too many plot additives that feel really lackluster. And there's too much borrowing of kind of the original score and soundtrack that doesn't really feel earned, or it feels really out of place. I think underneath the chaff of all the kind of like reboot, prequel nonsense, there actually is quite a good film in there somewhere. And I know that someone online has kind of edited all three films together into like one compact movie, which I haven't seen. But yeah, you do kind of watch it and you think like, okay, when this is being its own thing, it's really good. And then when it's trying to do anything that reminds you of the original trilogy, it just absolutely sucks. It's really lame. The whole bit with like Gandalf, Elrond, Saruman and Galadriel is so lame, and it feels like it's something out of like a really bottom of the barrel Marvel film. But the bit where like all the dwarves turn up at the beginning is great. It's really, really good fun. You know, when they have their own kind of musical motifs, that's all really good. Martin Freeman does a really good job playing Bilbo. He feels really well cast in that. But there are just bits in there where you're like, I can't really tell what's going on in the action. It's all CGI, it's all green screen, they're just running around. No one really feels like they're in danger. What are we doing here? You kind of get little glimpses of like, what are we doing here in the film? Will I continue watching them? Maybe. If I really can't think of anything else I want to watch, maybe I'll watch the other two and review them, but I'm not really in any hurry to. And then we went to see Obsession, the new film that everyone's kind of going crazy for. We saw it in the cinema. I think the praise this film is getting is rightfully earned. I feel like, you know, I'm really glad people are liking it, and I'm thrilled for the filmmaker because he's super young, and it's telling a really sort of interesting and very dark story. It's a very loaded film, thematically and narratively, but it just didn't do it for me. I don't know if it's because I'm getting old and boring, but sometimes just seeing horror films at the cinema I just really don't enjoy it. Or I think with this film in particular, it did just feel like it could have been a 60-minute Black Mirror episode maybe, and it feels like it was stretched over 100 minutes. Yeah, there's a lot going on in this film about gender roles and incel culture and nice guy culture and not all men culture, and I think the film is like rightfully uncomfortable and it's rightfully twisted, but I think, as Red Letter Media like to say of a lot of films that they review, it just felt like there were some screws that needed tightening, some things needed to be cut. I think the themes that it touches on needed to be lent into further. I think, you know, the main character is so unlikable, and I think that is also fine, but it's very unclear as to whether we should sympathize with him or not, which maybe is what it's going for. But I think like the real victim of the film is Nikki, played by Indy Navarrete, who is amazing in the film as well. And I think that just should have been explored more, because otherwise the film just divulged into, hey, we're going to do facial mutilation and we're going to just like have really gory, silly moments and we're going to rinse and repeat the same kind of jump scare and build up and payoff. I think it's one of those films. Here's my problem with it. It's a good film. There's a good idea in there. But like with The Substance and like with Begonia, which two films I also had problems with over the last couple of years, is that they were just kind of like one idea films where they had this idea of like, we're going to have it so this woman is obsessed with the main character. And every scene is just going to retread that joke over and over again to the point where boxes are going to be ticked narratively. And by the end of the film, there's going to be a really horrible climactic scene and it's going to end with no moral of the story and you're going to feel worse leaving than when you came in. That's kind of how I felt with Begonia. By the end of the film, you were like, great. there's no punchline. It's just the idea of the film is the ending. And I kind of felt the same way here. You know, I've not kind of like articulated my thoughts in notes that I can kind of refer to here, so I am kind of rambling, but yeah, I'm thrilled everybody enjoyed it. I think there's a great movie in there somewhere. It just didn't really do it for me. I mean, come on. The films I've talked about in this list of things like Our Little Sister and The Fellowship of the Ring, I don't really think a film like Obsession is really made for me. And then lastly, to round out the month, we watched Speed whilst we were on holiday in Lisbon. You know, if you don't know what it is, tensions run high when a crazed bomber rigs a Los Angeles bus with a device that will kill everyone on board if the vehicle's speed dips below 50 miles an hour. It stars Keanu Reeves and Sandra Bullock and Dennis Hopper as the sort of villain of the film. And it's directed by the guy who was the cinematographer for things like Die Hard, Basic Instinct, The Hunt for Red October, Lethal Weapon, Black Rain, which we just mentioned earlier, and he also directed Twister. And it's just a hoot. It's an absolute hoot of a movie, in the way that like that film will never ever ever get made again in the year 2026 and beyond. Purely because there is so much movement in the film, there is so much practical effects going on, there's so much stunt work, and it's also a very, very pre-9/11 film as well. Would be very, very difficult territory to tread. But man, like, what a movie. It just absolutely rips. My partner Sylvia was so stressed out when we were watching it, which is exactly what you want from a 90s action movie. And Keanu Reeves does a great job as the sort of protagonist, and Sandra Bullock's really good fun in it too. So yeah, it wasn't a very big month for movies, but it was very varied in terms of what I like and what I don't like, and what I enjoyed and what I didn't enjoy. I think the whole irony of Speed as well is that it won in a coin toss between watching that or The Devil Wears Prada, which I think tells you a lot about our kind of tastes and where we were at that evening. But yeah, that was my May in a nutshell, basically. I also finished playing Cyberpunk 2077. I finished the main storyline, another film or game with Keanu Reeves there. And it was enjoyable. Like, it kind of fell into the usual trap of like open world RPG games where there's a lot of content in the game, there's a lot of side quests, and there's lots of things you can do, but I just sort of hit a point where I was like, I'm ready to finish this game and just sort of move on to the next one and maybe get back to Elden Ring. And the main plot was really good. I think I got one of the sadder endings, which I was a bit miffed about, so maybe I might have to go back and do it again. But yeah, that was it for me basically. You know, the channel has been really, really fun to work on as well. Some videos have kind of resonated quite well. It's been lovely having loads of different comments on each video as well, and kind of getting into discussions about film and books, and I really, really appreciate everybody that's watched and commented and kind of given a recommendation and give me something to think about as well. Even if you're new here or if you've been here for the last couple of months, thank you for being here and thank you for watching. I want to work on some things like some reading vlogs where I kind of maybe read a manga and talk about it, or read a book and talk about it. I also did work on some videos once upon a time where I watch some Criterion closet picks that celebrities have done and talk about those films, so I might have another go at doing something like that. But yeah, this has been just a really lovely creative outlet, so thanks for being here. Click like, comment, and subscribe for more, and I'll see you next time. Bye, 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 bye.